Good morning, everyone. Nicole Vincent here. Thank you for watching the replay. I appreciate you taking your time. I will make it worth your while and hopefully educate you and give you some new information that you can take and go forth and live a better life that is more balanced and more full of light and purpose. So today we are going to be talking about cords. Cords are energetic connections that we have with other people, with places, with objects, with animals, with anything that has energy, which everything has energy. So you can have a cord to anything. Typically today we're going to be focusing on the person-to-person connection, but just be aware that those cords can be connected to other things other than just people. But in general, we're going to be talking about people-to-people connections. So I'm so excited. I'm going to let you guys hop on here. We got Patty, Beverly, Amy. Thank you so much for joining us, girls. This is going to be a useful topic. It's not one that comes up a lot, but in the work that I've been doing, God has really been shedding a lot of light in my experiences as I've been working with clients on cords lately, and so I feel it's very important to share this. So I will tell you right now, I am not a cord expert. I have not thoroughly studied them. I am going on what divine knowledge has been downloaded into my brain, what I've experienced, what I've explored, what I have learned. And so what I'm sharing is not the end-all be-all of cords. This is just to give you a little introduction and awareness that they are out there. Good morning, Beverly. Good morning, Sylvia. Good morning, Yvette. So be aware. This is something that can really drain you, can really tie you down, and really inhibit your progression. And so be mindful of them. So first off, let's start with positive cords. This is something that is very, very important, that these cords are healthy, that they're flowing well, that they are doing what they're supposed to do. And so healthy cords are going to be cords that we have between very important relationships in our lives. These are going to be heart-to-heart cords. This is typically going to be like mother to child, between spouse or life partners, child to parent. Sometimes you'll have them with grandparents if there's a close relationship there. But in general, these positive cords that are going to be staying there and that are going to be consistent are going to be very, very, very close relationships that are being nourished from on a daily basis, or relationships that started out in very, very early childhood. And so these cords, I want you to imagine they're going from heart to heart. Okay, so cords, they shift pretty easy in my experience, but it's a lot of visualization. So I want you to imagine maybe if you're a mother, imagine a child. If you have a mother that you have a good relationship with, you can imagine that cord. If you have, it doesn't even have to be a good relationship. These cords can get tangled. They can get dirty. They can get kinked off. They can get unbalanced. And so what I want you to do is you can imagine a cord to somebody that you love. Let's think of just a positive someone that you really, really love. And imagine that cord. And as you imagine it, what I typically will see, and this is just in my mind, I don't physically see it, but you can see things like on your end, it might have a bigger opening, and then it might narrow as it gets closer to the other person, where they're only able to receive this much and you're sending this much, okay? So there might not be congruency in size. There might be tangles, there might be knots in that cord. If there's been history of trauma or hurt, there can be tanglements in those cords. It can be dirty. So it can be like a clogged pipe where there's not a lot getting through and it's just a dirty, mucky place. And there can also be kind of bubbles where it kind of, it'll bulge out a little bit within the cords, and it's just getting stuck and it's not being able to get through. There can be, it can be very sluggish, a slow flow of light. It can be too fast, like a fire hose, so to speak, of light. I'm trying to think of the other things that I've seen in these cords. You can have leaks in the cords. So like little bitty holes where stuff is leaking out. And so as you feel these cords, should be a positive one. And so when you're tuning into these cords And this is something I kind of try to check in on a regular basis, especially with my children and my husband. So I try to check in and make sure that these cords are flowing well. And so what you want to do, and you might not be able to visualize that cord, but I will tell you that as you tune in, you're going to get different images. It might be a color. It might be a taste. It might be a smell. It might be just a feeling of what that cord might have a problem with. Listen to that. That's your intuition trying to communicate with you and tell you, hey, this is how this cord is imbalanced. And so what I like to do is, as we're tuning into these cords, ask it to untangle. That's usually the first question that I ask. If this is supposed to be a positive cord, I ask it to completely untangle. And then I feel, okay, now that it's untangled, we've got a nice straight line. Is that cord, is it rigid like a PVC pipe, or is it nice and flexible? Because you want it to be flexible. You want it to be able to change as needed. When more of love is needed, you want it to be able to expand. And when it's in a time of, everything's going good, you don't need it to be as big. And so you want it to be flexible. And you don't necessarily want it too short. You'll see cords that are too short if somebody's too clingy, or they're needing too much from you, or vice versa. And so you want that cord to be long enough that they can float around, they can do their own thing, they're good, but that cord is still there. So kind of, ask that as you're picturing this cord, ask it to balance. Is this cord, is it rigid or is it flexible? So ask it to be nice and flexible, and you want it to be congruent in size. Like I said at the beginning, you don't want to be having this big of a connection on your end, and then they only have this itty bitty connection, because what that's going to do is it's imbalance. And so we want to have congruent connection points. The next thing is clean it out. Is there any muck? If there's any gunk, ask that light just come through and clean it out and get rid of that. Get rid of that gunk. The next thing that I will ask is to place filters at both ends. And the filters will change as needed. The filters typically are going to be, in my belief system, and you can translate this into your belief system, but I do a filter through Christ, so that anything that I'm sending out is going to be filtered through his love to make it perfect, so that as it's going out to the other person, it's good. And then same thing when they're sending stuff to me, I want it to be filtered through Christ, so that I'm able to see their true intent, their perfect love. Okay, so that filter, and that you can say God, you can say universe, you can say whatever you want to, that makes sense. But the filters there help literally filter what's going on, because sometimes I might not be able to communicate with love to one child in a way that they necessarily receive it. But I can, as I have that intention and it's getting filtered, that child will be able to receive it in a way that they understand. Does that make sense? So we've cleaned it out, we've untangled it, we've made sure the light is flowing through it, we've made sure it's not too short or too long, we've made sure it's not rigid, that it's flexible, and that there's filters in place. And so that's your love cord, okay? And you want to have those with it's going to be a small circle. You're not going to be having love cords with everyone. You can have momentary ones, like if you're working with someone, you're serving them, then you can have a love cord with them, but that should disconnect, that should release as you're no longer interacting with that person. If you're feeling that it's still connected and it's not releasing, then you can release that in love to God, Christ, universe, whatever your beliefs are. The next thing, let's talk about negative cords. This is kind of typically where you're going to hear about cords a lot. And typically negative cords are going to be they're going to be given out by you. Maybe you're being a little codependent or a little needy or something, or you're going to be receiving negative cords. Now, if you're giving them out, you're going to be giving them out from your right side. So if you are having right side problems, let's say we're going to you say shoulder for an example, okay? Let's say your right shoulder has been giving you problems for years and you're not sure what's going on. You put every oil on it, you take medication, you've emotional release, whatever, but that right shoulder is still giving you problems. More than likely, you are going to be giving out cords that are originating from your right shoulder to someone else or something else, okay? And so this is where muscle testing is going to come into play and be very, very useful. And you can use the muscle testing, of course, on the positive course to make sure that they are balanced and good and to identify them as well. So if you've got that right shoulder that's giving you a lot of problems, let's say, okay, am I giving out cords from that right shoulder? Yes. And then what you can do is how many? You want to identify how many. And so you can count how many negative cords am I giving out from that shoulder. And once you identify them, you can say, okay, do I need to identify who or what they're connected to? And if you get a yes, then go through, figure it out. I bet names will probably pop into your mind, or faces will pop into your mind of those negative connections that you are giving cords out to. You're giving away your agency. You are letting other people rule your emotions or happiness, okay? That's kind of a good way to imagine giving those cords out. Now, once you identify them, then we can release them. Now, I'm going to wait for the releasing in just a second because we're going to talk about the other negative cords is receiving cords. Now, if you have problems on the left side of your body, more than likely you are receiving cords. That means that you are being a plug-in power strip for whoever wants to plug in. And so I was working on a client that was having some sciatic issues, and she had a lot of cords plugged into a spot on her body, and so we can have those if they're, let's say the left shoulder now. So if we have the left shoulder, hello Ellie, if we have the left shoulder instead of the right shoulder, we have people plugged into that spot. That means that they are sending cords out to us, and so we're taking on their stuff. Good morning, Molly. We're taking on their issues, their emotions, and they can be draining us as well. And so that can happen. So those are the two kind of negative cords, either giving out or receiving. Now, those are the general rules. Can they be switched up a little bit? Of course. Of course, you can sometimes identify a cord that you're giving out that's connected to something on the left side, or a cord that you're receiving that's affecting the right side. But in general, that's kind of how it is broken up. Now, when we identify a negative cord, we're not going to explore it like we did the positive cord because we're not wanting to balance it. We're wanting to release it. Now, the same thing with emotion code. We want to make sure that we're releasing in a manner that the body can handle that's not going to be overwhelming to the body. Now, I will tell you that in general, you can typically release most of them or all at once. Now, a lot of times you'll see people that you just slice and cut the cord, and that's kind of a general way, but a lot of times you will find them reattaching. So let's be mindful and careful with how we are removing these cords. Now, these cords, as you're imagining them, they're usually going to be kind of withered. Sometimes they're going to be like a green or a black color or a brown color, just kind of like sucking you dry. Or, if you're giving it out, it's just usually that typically is going to look like it's like a red or a fiery kind of dark color. But as those go out, we're going to want to sever these. We're going to want to cut these cords off, and we're going to want to release them so that we are in our own space. We're not being affected by other people's energy, and it's not having a draining effect on us, okay? So, and again, this is going to come back to your belief terminology, so please do not be offended by the terminology I use. Please substitute your own terminology and what resonates with you. But when I am releasing a cord and I identify it, I ask it to release. I don't necessarily cut, but sometimes it might help you to physically feel, like, let's say it's on your shoulder. It might, imagine that you're cutting it. But it's almost like a prayer. I release it to Christ to have him heal and mend whatever is going on with that other person that they're feeling they need a cord to me. You can say God, you can say universe, you can say light, whatever resonates with you. So please do not be offended by my terminology. But I release it to Christ, and I ask that he heal that need, and that he also heal and seal any connection points that where the negative things were. Because we don't want to have open wounds in our aura, in our energetic space, right? And so we want to ask to heal and seal in its perfect form that spot so that it's not a weak point. Because what happens, you'll notice you'll have weak points. I have a couple weak points. I have weak points in my head where I get headaches, and then weak points in my back. And so that's typically where I will find cords. And you will probably notice similar patterns in your life. But as you release these, you don't want to just and be gone. That is going to sever it. But the problem with that, the person, especially if it's one that you're receiving, if a cord that you're receiving, that person is probably going to all of a sudden be like, what just happened? And they're going to start calling you, and they're going to start bugging you, and they're going to just be like, wait, that connection's gone. What happened? And they're going to try and reattach, and they probably will reattach. And so be mindful of that, because they will feel that disconnect, because it literally is a disconnect. But as I'm finding, as we release it and let God, Christ take care of it, that need is not as, I'm not feeling that, oh, I need to reconnect as much. And so, and also as you heal up the spot where you release those cords, it's going to keep it whole so that it's not a weak point anymore. So that is kind of a releasing cords, and the technique that I have found has been very, very effective. Do you guys have any questions or any comments? Like I said at the beginning, this is not the end all be all of cords. There's a lot of different information out there. I encourage you to, if this is something that's speaking to you, of course, seek your own intuition. Let it teach you. Let God teach you what you're supposed to know about cords. I've read several different articles, and they have some good points. And this is just kind of what I have been exploring and been taught as I've been releasing these cords and exploring these cords. So guys, if you have questions after the video, please feel free to type in the chat or post in our holistic group. I'd be so happy to answer those for you. I'm kind of feeling like I might do another bulk testing, just a free testing for those out there. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do this week, but be watching for that. Another thing to watch for is if you're local to the Houston area, we are going to be having a meetup at my house. So we'll be hanging out here in my room. You'll be like, oh my gosh, that's the room. But we're going to be having a meetup here at my house on the 31st of July. It's a Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. So check the group for that event information. So guys, have a fabulous, fabulous week. I will talk with you soon. Have a great one. Bye-bye.